Now we're back to the rocket scene. In our first lessons, we create smoke from those guys going to the right and to the left. In fact, this is the same simulation, just turn this on the left side. Okay, but we can see that there is no fire and there is no smoke which is going to the camera because the fire is colliding with the ground system, and in the first few frames it's going to the sides. There is some tunnels over there, but now when our rocket is begin to rise up, we should have some smoke to the camera and some smoke here near the ground system. So to do that, we need to get this rocket to have this engine. In fact, this pretty simple project. We have some rotor paint here, have an image, make some cleanup, remove some details like the shuttle which was here, clean the sky, add some extra details here from another image, so just a few different images. This is something, I don't know, maybe mask, and add a little bit of flame here to create an orange tint. And because it's just simple static picture, I grab the camera from 3ds Max. I create a camera inside of this, and I hold this frame for projecting this image into the plane. So I make a frame hold from camera for projecting, and the animated camera create animation, in fact the camera movement. And here we have our smoke. All right, so this is like original render. I took all those 3 different layers, 3 different elements. So this is my light from the engine, I call it E-light. As you remember, it's just point direct light, skylight, and the sunlight. So there's 3 different lights. Copy an alpha channel, make some grading, and from this smoke, I create this smoke. Correct the alpha, make some directional blur on the first frames when we get a smoke going from the engines, because I don't create the real motion blur with render. Make some additional grading, transforming to get in the right position, some masks to cut some unuseful areas. And another scene just with different settings, you can see there is a little bit more turbulence. So less turbulence, more turbulence. And I rotate it using the transform node in that position, add the motion blur in the nuke. Take some time for calculation, and again project this into the plane because I render this with just static camera without any movement. So I apply this to the card, render scanline to add some movement, and then marry this with the background. Then I add some lights here, like a column lights, and add the render geometry. So the same, this render from 3ds Max, because I prefer to use V-Ray, where V-Ray will be in Houdini, and maybe use it. I like Mantra, but Mantra is a little bit slow for me, so I add let it glow here, have some passes from the engines, have some passes from the light here, you can see. So that's what we have. And now our next task is, let me just connect this, add some chromatic aberrations, add some grain. So our next task is creating the fire from the engines and some smoke over here. So what we should have there. So here's a new scene. I call it rocket fire. Let me save this, and I begin with geometry. In fact, I can import this using Alembic scene. So choose Alembic scene, and inside of my export folder in the HIP, in our project folder, I have an export, and there is rocket version 1 Alembic. We can use this setup because we have an animation. Our rocket begin to rise up, and that's why I want to have those engines here. So I want to convert them for the source for my file. So let's go dive here. I don't need this, mostly those I don't need to have. And this is my geometry. I will use the object manage node to get this geometry. Just drag it here and choose non-relative path. Okay. Now Control X, go somewhere here, create geometry. Call this, maybe call this just geo. All right, hide this inside of here, Control V, and I want to add into this object the transformation. So now we have this geometry with an animation. So we can simply move this somewhere there. I don't need to see this. Another thing I want to import is my cameras. So import Alembic scene and choose the camera version 1 input. And I have a camera, so we can paste here. And if you look from my camera, let's go here and physical camera. That's exactly what I should have there. So this is my rocket going up. So I don't know why I didn't have an animation for my cam. And there is no animation. I don't know why. I need to have another camera. And I don't know why, but it's go to my camera, come on. So here's the cam. Oh no, that's okay. There's some bug, I guess. And yeah, we have a movement, we have a camera movement, we have a rocket. So I hope this should be matched. We have the same frame per second, 24 frames. Now we can work. So another geometry I want to add here is our launching system. And I can go here to geometry. Let's rename it rocket. And let's add the another file. Go to my export folder, and I guess that this is my BGO. Yes, ground rocket BGO. Accept this, and this is my ground system. I convert this into BGO because I add some additional stuff here. Create some holes to let my fire leaking here on those sides, because if I have just a hole here without those tunnels, the fire will not go anywhere and it will push back here, and I don't want to do this. So I will merge this. Well, actually I do need to merge this for now. This is going to be my ground. And let's back to the rocket. I don't need the full rocket, the whole, I just need those guys underneath here when I want to put my sources. So if you go here and look at information, we can see that this is a limbic packet geometry, so we don't have any geometry in the bag. So I will convert this into the mesh. So connect this now. We have polygons, we have vertices, all this stuff, and there's a lot of different things, which I don't need basically. I don't want to render this because I need UVs and all other stuff. So do I have any groups? No, I don't have groups. So now go and select, go maybe to the front view. Front view, make selection, and should select those guys here. Hold in a shift key to select those, hold in a control key to unselect those. Let's go to the bottom viewport, and we can see that, well, maybe I should have a little bit more. So go to the front view. I should add those guys too, I guess. Okay. Okay, so now let's back to bottom. Yeah, I should remove some of those. I hope it doesn't take too many time. And oops. Go here. So as always, Control for removing, Shift for adding new selection. It's pretty easy. Okay. If you lose some few polygons, I think that it's not a big problem, because I will convert this into the volume. And let's move it here. Here and here and here. I guess that's all what I need. Remove those guys. Anyway, now let's go to Control that, perspective view, and click delete. And with the blouse node, I choose delete non-selection, and here's my engines. There's some additional stuff I do need to, but I don't care about that. I don't care about that. What I want to do, really, I want to fill the holes with the polyfill node. Holding a Shift to add the polyfill, made with a single polygon. And then go to a VDB from polys and add density. I want to add a density. Now, cool. Now I have those engines. Pretty cool. Maybe I'll make it a little bit smaller, 0.5. Should be fine with this resolution. And I want to fill those with some scatter points. So add a scatter, fill the density, or I basically can do the next thing. I can add a null object here and say this is our engines and engines, and make this null object and Control X. So I want to create a source. So it should be my, just call it source. Or sorry, add a geometry and call this like a fire source. All right, now go to Control V. Now object merge. Select my geo and my engines, and I think that I need to add an E here. Now connect here, come on, with the polys, with the scatter node. So object merge is here, polyfill, VDB from polygons. Why I still saw those guys? Huh, that's interesting. Let's add now scene view. Now it's fine. Sometimes this happens. So I close this, this, and this. What I don't need to. Go to my objects. So now I have just my scatter points. Now with those scatter points, I want to emit a little bit more particles, like 50,000 particles. And it took too much time for relaxing. I don't need a relaxing, so just 50,000 points. That's all what I want. Now I want to use those points for getting particles emitting upward. That's not upward, downward. So to do this, I want to use the global seed and make it $t just to place a different position for particles in each frame. So each frame we have the same 50,000 particles, but in different positions. Now let the pop network. And with the pop network, that's going to be my fire particles. Go down here and remove those guys. I don't need a gray layer. All what I need is just that I want to use my all points, because it didn't have a geometry. It's fast contact geometry. Now with the burst rate, how many particles I want to use? Well, I want to use all my particles and don't need any activation here, but I want to set the life expectancy. So maybe like 0.1 with some small divergence like 0.025. Okay. Now let's go to attributes. We don't have a velocity. Basically, those particles we created, they doesn't move anywhere because we don't have a velocity inside of our particles. So there's two different ways how we can apply this. And the first way, we can add a velocity over here and after the scatter node, just with the attribute wrangle or attribute warp, anything you can apply here, add a velocity, and then it will transfer to the DOP network. But anyway, we can use the attributes tab here to set initial velocity. Okay, so we add a velocity. I want to put a velocity maybe like 0.35. Here should be fine, and maybe let's 20, 20, and 20. A little bit of, differences. And that's what we have, the particles. Cool. Now that's much better. And with the pop solar, I guess I will leave all those guys by default. So let's see how many particles do I have. After the frame, like 7. We have a huge speed, so I guess that will be enough for me. All right, so now I add a pyro source. That's exactly what I want to have, the pyro source. Source fuel, so what I want to add here is definitely a fuel and the temperature. So fuel and the temperature, one by one. And I'm gonna use the keep input. All right, so the same particles amount, and add the attribute noise, and add my volume rasterize attributes. As in always, the fuel, temperature, and I guess velocity, because I have a velocity inside of my particles. I don't need to create this attribute because we already have the velocity. It's here. So I send it into the velocity field, which is cool. We have it, temperature, fuel. Let's add some noise for our fuel temperature. Just a bit of noise. And 1D, yes, an additive, animated, maybe, yeah, simplex should be fine, and remap from -1 to 1. This one to normalize. Okay, the density removal guy. All right, not too many noise here. So with the size, I guess I will leave it as it is. So just in case we will have a minimum, I'll add it. And another thing I want to add here is maybe play with the particle scale, because I have small particles in fact here. So maybe I will use particles scale here to add more scale, or I can play with the scale using the life. Okay, so go to attribute wrangle, and let's call it p-scale remap or something like that. And let's create the normalized life. As you know, we have a life, we have an age, let's normalize it age, NH. And how we can create our NH? We can use the existed attribute NH, or we can set the current or norm, let's call it differently, norm age should be an age divide by the life. So now if we go to our particles and jump to spreadsheet, we can see that the particles we just was burned, they have very low norm age, and the particles which will die soon, they have a big normal age. right? So we have an age 0.12 and the life 0.12 CTA42. So we can see that it just a tiny bit till this particle will die. Okay, now I will use this norm age to change the p scale. So before I do this, let's set a p scale and let's grab some channel for that and call it a p scale. And the p scale should be, I want to multiply it by the norm age. Okay, now it's zeros, but if I add the p scale attribute here, it's not an attribute, it's a value I want to change. And if I set maybe 2, now you can see that we have a difference between a very slow scale and the bigger scale. So the bigger age for my particles, the bigger particle scale attribute. It's rasterizing now. Oh, come on. Okay, oh, yeah, my particle scale 1 here. It's a very big scale. P scale 1, maybe even lower, 0.5. So you see on the burst, when our particle just was created, we have a very low p scale, and I will increase it. Anyway, you can play with voxel size too, because 0.1 is very low voxel size. Actually, well, voxel amount. And now this can be a little bit better, maybe even smaller, like 0.3. Maybe like this. So you can play with that later. And this is my source. So it's like 9 million. Nah, it's too much. Let's add a 0.1. Okay. Don't need such a huge resolution. Add a null, and let's call it fill out. Now we can create the cache for the source. So I'm going to file cache, because you can see that we spent a little bit of time to get the proper value for this. So it's going to be my fuel source. And let's say this. And the thing is, I will use a voxel size 0.1, and if I want to, I can select the particles. I can change this. I mean that I will link it with the pyro source, but I think that I won't create the size less than 0.01 because we have a very large scale simulation. All right. So 0.1 should be fine. And I will save this fill source $s 0.4 .f, yeah. So save to disk. And now I will wait till this is finished, and I'm going to interrupt, close. Yeah, the thing is I want to change to 150. It's very low frame range, and I will use it till 150. Save to disk again. So I make a pause till this finish. Now we cache this thing out, and let's create Adobe network. Getting the file. But before I do this, I want to go here on my geometry, and I want to convert this ground into a volume, because I want to add this guy for simulation. So let's select VDB from polygons and create the distance VDB, which is fine, and what you saying, quadrant angles. So, well, okay. And let's add a null object. Oops, not you. Let's call this properly. This should be my geo or ground VDB. And another null object should be just my ground without VDBs. Just to look on that. Okay, so fire sim. Alright, so the pyro solver, the smoke object, the volume source, the static object, static solver, and the merge, and gas volume raster. Oh, not the volume, just gas raster. Not raster. Sorry, resize. Gas resize fluid dynamic. Now let's connect those guys. So here you go, and you here, just merge those and connect it. So with the static object, I want to add my ground from the geometry around. Not you. I can take that, but anyway. Now with the collisions guide, and should use the volume sample by size 0.1 with the proxies and geo and ground VDB. So let's see, do we have a ground? Call and hide that and use the RBD solver, collision guide. I guess it takes some time. Come on. And here you go. A big object. So I hide collision guide. Maybe I hide this guy. Don't need to look on that. Now with the volume source, let's get the source. Fill out. Add fuel, source fuel. So fuel into fuel, temperature, V2 velocity. That's like by default. Maybe add a fuel a little bit more, like 2, go to scale it. And with the smoke object, I definitely need to grab my source. So let's go here, and there's my particles. Somewhere under the ground, or I don't get why you. Where are you? Something interesting going on here. No, it's fine, just looking from the ground. All right, now go to fill out. Go here, fire sim. Now let's add the proper size. So we can play with the bounding box expressions here, like we did, or I can create like this box to have a proper size. Anyways, this box will be much bigger when it will rise. So by that, for a start, should be fine. Let's play this, and now I want to turn this off and maybe disable it, enable this on the creation frame, and with you I don't need to clamp to maximum bounds. Is the density, you can play with density, you can play with different, play with the fuel. In fact, our fuel is maybe a little bit faster rising up, so yeah, definitely want to add the reference field, not just density but the fuel. And a little bit bigger upper padding scale, maybe like 5, and a bigger padding 0.5, because we have a huge velocities over there. All right, now you can see that we have some interaction between the smoke and disable U and our ground system. Now I can see it. I guess we don't need to have interaction between the rocket and the fire because our fire is going down here and it will not rising up to the rocket. I hope it. Now go to Pirate Solver. I should correct our combustion model. Now, with simulation, I want to increase a little bit of the time scale, just a little bit, and create a small diffusion temperature, very small temperature diffusion, and the big cooling rate. So I want to burn my fire very fast. Oh, actually, burn my fuel very quickly. Get a buoyancy leaf, maybe 2, not too many. And with the combustion model, let's go and set it -1. I want to ignite all the fuel without depending the temperature. Now let's add a multi-field here. The density here, and some temperature and the heat. You can play with those settings. We can switch between the heat and the temperature. Anyway, we can play with that, but just for visualization. So have some fire here. Now let's play a bit. Bam! Big fire from the engines, and it's going down. I don't need to create such a huge gas release, I guess, because it's expanding too fast. Too fast. I don't need that. So maybe like, I don't know, 7. With the burn rate, I want to add as a maximum. So I want to burn almost all of that. And with the fuel efficiency, make it small, very small. Temperature output the same. With the flame height, don't need to have a big flame. I will have particles, maybe like 0.2. I will have particles moved from this. And the smoke, create dense smoke. Maybe even more, like 3. I want to have a huge smoke amount and 0.4 for heat cutoff. Alright, with advanced, definitely need to increase the number of sub-steps, like 0.23, but for my final result, I will set it 424. So I hope I will set it later. I don't want to have on the start such a big sub-steps amount. Don't need a huge dissipation, so like 0.1 should be enough, and maybe I'll add just disturbance and the shredding and confinement. Cool. I don't need a turbulence, I don't need a sharpening. For the smoke, I can play with disturbance maybe a little bit smaller, like 0.4, and shredding I will leave as it is. And you know what? I will leave all those guys by default. I think that will be enough. So let's play with that. I will see the interaction. Maybe I create a little bit bigger container and set for my gas resize fluid dynamic don't go lower than some values. Yeah, let's make some stuff. Stop it. Can decrease the voxel size because it's, oh no, 0.2 should be fine in this case. So maybe I will raise it like 50 or even more, like 60 here, and 20 go and the front view. Where is my geometry? I want to see it. And I want to drag it over here. Like here. Okay. All right, and it should be a little bit bigger. 30 by 30. Just to have enough space. Anyway, our gas resize fluid dynamic will create a smaller container in the beginning, but I want to say that you don't need to go down lower than -y. All right, that should be good. Cool. Or we can here in the smoke object set closed boundaries and make -1. So it's can play with that as you want. You can play with this, you can play with that. And here my fire smoke simulation. Let me just increase the amount, because I need to spend a lot of time for getting proper result, and I guess that I want to decrease this voxel amount to 0.1 and make a final sim. I don't want to spend a lot of time for getting a mid-level simulation, so it should be a fire input. I already did this simulation, so what I want to do, I want to make end up input fields, and I hope it will be the same as I did earlier. We will see it. So the fire sim, and go and call it smoke object, something like that, and choose pyro. And select the pyro. Oh, I hope I will change the voxel size. It's too big. It's too big for the scale. We have a large scale sim. And what I want to add here is just decrease the division size. In fact, you know what? Sometimes we can trick. We can trick. You know what I want to do? I want to take my rocket and let's go and make it smaller. Not too many, like here, so maybe like 2 times smaller. Go to uniform scale, make it 0.5. And hide as object and make the same stuff here with my ground. So connect it here, here. So it should be a match. Yeah. Here we go. And another thing I should have is see my particles here. So now that's what we have. It's looking good. Maybe even bigger. Where's my pop solver? The velocity, well, no, not bad. I guess they should fine. That should be fine. So I'll connect this for a moment, just for some test results. Now with the division size 0.1, it should work a lot faster. And come on. Here's a few frames, and we have 12 million voxels in this area. I guess it should be fine in this case. And let's save it. Let's save it. I need a density velocity, don't need a rest field, rest 2, temperature, hit, don't need a fill, don't need a CD. Just you. And with importing, I think I will resample my velocity, because I don't need a very high velocity in the stars, so all my velocities. Very high quality velocity field, something like 0.5. So it's be a little bit smaller. All right, and go to your file cache. Let's call it rocket file. And let's render this thing out. So I don't need to hit name, just $s, $4. Okay, load from disk and save it to disk. And now I have a fire out, create the null object. Go to this. I guess I should have some lights here. So go to the skylight to create the shadows. And I don't want to see my skylight in a viewport. Okay. So here's my smoke. Definitely to increase my smoke, so I can go and add another transform node. We can make a uniform scale 2, or we can make it lower like we did with geometry by go to invert transformation, so we make it bigger. Okay, great, like in the inverse. All right, so go to maybe like frame 37. And it's looking pretty good. I like the amount of details here. And you can see that a lot of smoke which is going into the camera over here. It's looking good. And another thing, you can see that I clamp this area which is going on the backwards. I don't need a smoke simulation here because I won't see this seam. So inside of my fire seam, I turn on my gas accessibility dynamic plus Z. So my container won't go bigger than my initial container from this smoke object. I don't want to create an expansion in that side because I have camera from this angle, and I don't care about all those smoke with the backside, from the backside. So what I need to do is create the render. So I don't want to play with visualization. I just go and create the render from my camera. But before I do this, I definitely need to create some made objects to, cut those areas where we have the engines from the rocket and the ground. So I will go to geometry and disable those transformations, U and U. Now we will leave those guys as it was. I go to frame 96 and enable my engines here to see that our fire and the engines are matching. So they exactly the same position. Have a smoke here, the fire, and now I want to merge those guys to add. So actually can't even convert with the rocket and the engines, and take this. I disable transformations so they have a real scale as we had, and go to the null objects and call it render. Connect and make a render flag. So just right mouse button, render. Now it doesn't matter what we display as a display flag, but we will see. We will choose all geometry for creating a meta object. So now let's go to material. With material palette, I will create the fireball, and I will add the principled light shader and go to materials. So that's going to be my mate geo, and it doesn't matter what color I will add here. So I'm going to leave like a gray color. and I will apply this to my geometry. So select my geo, accept, go to out, go to mantra. So let's select the camera first. Camera, physical camera, that's correct. Then I need a hip name. Now within objects, I select my fire input. And as a faucet made, I select geo. Cool. Now with my lights, so this is the camera, and this is how we have a light from the left upper corner. Okay, so now let's rotate a little bit of my skylight here. Let's drag those guys. Go to skylight, and we have 180 by y-axis. And let's see, where is it? Where you are? So the sunlight. Where are those guys? Let me just turn off a moment. Those, and now I need to turn this a little bit. Oops. Come on. So 100. Wrong side. 150. 280. Yeah. 270. Should works fine. And now let's make a render. So go to render view, select my camera, so I'm smudge 1, and let's apply my shader here, the fireball. Come on, what's wrong with you? Yeah, no, fireball, cool. I know, but sometimes it's some back with visualization. So go to material with a fireball, density scale a little bit bigger, and maybe increase the brightness a bit. I should work with the clear white color for my smoke. Here's heat, here's some temperature. Okay, let's render this in, let's select frame, I know my frame 75, just to see how it looks with the default settings. With the temperature scale, I guess I will use 1. And let's render. Definitely to add another one additional light, like a volume light, because I want to make my fire should be the light source. But now let's see, what do we have? And made the smoke looking pretty dark as for me. Go to out and let's set some extra image planes, and I want to play with the direct light. Oops. Let's choose per each variable for each light. And the reason for that, I want to see the color for my smoke. Mainly the dark smoke color we get from the skylight. If you choose, yeah, you can see that we have some bluish tint here, less blue here, but it's pretty dark. So what I can do, I can go to my skylight and accept of the sky environment. I can choose the let's select sharp pick smoke color version 2. So this image is from just one picture. You can see this picture with the shuttle, and I use this. It's not an HDRI, but it's just JPEG file. So I don't need to get, like a proper reflections or lighting. I still have the sunlight as a direct light, and the skylight is here. So it's looking pretty good. Now it's much brighter here. So let's add another one light, select my fire input, and choose volume light. Volume light. And as you know, this volume light will use the same shader as we applied for our smoke. So sometimes it doesn't work, but all what we need to do is just stop rendering and then render this thing again. Render out. And it's very simple. We can see if it has an influence on my smoke or not, just to look on the volume direct, in the volume light direct. So when the render begins, now it will show us, come on. Now if you look on that, you can see that we have a volume light. And it's not very bright. So we definitely need to increase the intensity and exposure like 2 by 2, and this now is much brighter, and also depends on the density of our smoke. But mainly this volume light is very, very noisy. So I want to increase the sample quality maybe like to 4, so to get less noise. I want to push my overall sampling here on the mantra node, because I can raise up my sampling from 3 by 3 to like 4 by 4, 5, 6, or anything else. But I don't want to do this. Let's go and see what do we have here. Mainly, I don't want to change too many here. I just want to play a little bit with the fire strengths. So get back to my material. And let's play with that. With the fire temperature field, we can play with the fit range to set that, okay, I can reduce my fire or the temperature intensity like 4 times. So all values which we had like 4, we can decrease to 1. So we decrease in the frame range, decrease in the color range or the temperature range in this case. And we can play with intensity scale here. I want to change the scattering phase to 0.02 to change the scattering. I want that light should go through the smoke a little bit. And I want to choose the black body color. It should work better in my case here. I want to play with ramps, so just a black body. It's use the temperature to create a grading, to create the texture or the color from a fire, depending on the temperature. The bigger temperature, the brighter fire I'm gonna have. So here you have sunlight, which is pretty good. Now, you know, with the scattering, it's looking good. Skylight and the volume light. It's looking not bad. So we can play with the density, we can play with the scattering phase, how many light will go through the smoke, and set a little bit more bigger. So maybe intensity scale even more, like 3. I don't want to have a very, very bright light, but from this position, what I can do, I can create a very bright picture, but rather than that, I can decrease the brightness on the in Nuke. When I have all those layers, I just can decrease the brightness. So if you have a bigger brightness in picture, is always good rather than you have a smaller brightness, because when you want to make a picture more darker, it's better than you try to make it more brighter, because then you will have some noisy stuff. So if you see that these over bright areas, they are too bright, we can see the flame, you know, we can see the texture from this flame. We always can reduce the brightness, especially from this fire, using the volumetric direct, volume light direct, and we can leave the same, you know, brightness for my smoke. So again, if you say that this smoke is over brighter, so it's very, very bright, when you decrease it, we always can play with those layers, or just go and decrease the white point to the proper level. All right. So, and with some extra, let's go to out, and with some extra images, I want to set the two more additional layers or additional elements. That should be my fire mask and the smoke mask. That's all what I have. I don't want to have an indirect light. In this case, I don't have the volume limit. Or you know what? We can play with that. We can play with that, man. Let's play with that. Let's add just one volume limit. And what does it mean that we will have an indirect light for my lighting? I'm going to increase the volume step rate to 0.5 to get a better quality. I will leave the pixel sample like here, just 3 by 3. I hope that will be enough. I don't want to raise it too much because the render will be much slower. Go to physically based rendering, doesn't change too much. With objects, fine. Candidate lights, all lights. Now it's very bright, but nothing I want to add here is on the extra images. Go and set the indirect light 2 and per light for each light. So now we have even more tools to play with that in the compositing stage. So I'm gonna leave this. We can play with the noise level, increase the minimum ray samples, something like that. But we can see that we have the volume indirect light, we have the skylight indirect, the sunlight indirect. So there's a bit difference between sunlight direct and indirect. It's like a light going through the smoke. We can play with that. All right. So now let's render this thing out. Let's call this right now like a fire and smoke, and render from the animal range. I make 150, I guess, till $150 for, yeah, cool. So it will take a long time. So what I want to do, I want to render this out and show you what we have on Nuke. And we back to our scene. So that's what we had till we work with fire. So I cut some areas here to avoid clamping. And now this is my render. I'll render out now to frame 80 is a long render time. It's like a half hour per frame. And you can see that this picture is very bright. You can see that, we have some information inside, we have the fire and the smoke. So now with all those layers, we can play with the images. So with this shuffle, I take the sunlight indirect. It's creating nice, like a foggy thing here. And this is our skylight direct, which is pretty good. There's a lot of details here in the front of camera. I like this layer. Here we go, just a fire mask, so I can separate my fire from all simulations. So you can see that I can see fire here, but I definitely can see that this is my fire. And with the volumetric indirect, I add a little bit of blur because even with the force sampling, you can see this very noisy stuff, especially if it is indirect. With direct, it can be a little, less noisy. But with indirect, we need to not just increase the sampling here, but in our light, but increasing the sampling in the mention node. We add just one bounce, so it's not too many, and that's why it's a little bit noisy. But anyway, I don't want to add more bounces because I already has a long time render. So that's what we had here, and that's what I had now. I want to make it more like a milky. It's very bluish here. So I'm using the grade node to take my skylight direct and make it more like a milky. Okay, play with the white point to make it less brighter, and play with the gain and with the gamma. You can see that I put a little bit more red colors to that because I want to match this smoke with all other smokes around. All right, I make a reformat because I forget about, I render out with the 720 and not with 180. So I reformat it to the full HD format and I add a motion blur. I just disable that in this case just to see all those details, but really want to do this, really want to add here because the smoke, especially in the first stages, had very, very fast moving. So I need to add some motion blur here. So another thing I can apply here is maybe some kind of the shadow from the smoke, but anyway, is all that's just compositing stuff. And we can do this here. So now this smoke is looking pretty good. All right. Okay, so you can try to play with this using the flame option, but I tried to do this. In fact, I have a scene and I can show you. This scene. And where you are. Go to frame like a 50. And here's our pyro post process. So that's what I get from our sparse mode. So, well, I'm not playing with those shaders too much. I use a black body shader, so it's just my test simulation. I use the same fire source as I did for my old one pyro source. But in this case, what I did is play with an expansion, because all what we did till this time, we create just a smoke from the fire. But if we create just the smoke and leave our flame as it is, it won't expand. But from my fire, which is going from the edges, I should create some expansion. It should go to the sides from the engines. And that's where I put a temperature inside my flame panel here and add an expansion. By default, we have expansion like 0.7. I increase it to 1, and that causes my flame create an expansion. So it's not going just with velocities, it's expanding. It's creating a nice thing. And change the flame range from 0.2 to 1 for my expansion, and create the biggest strength for my temperature, which is pulling with the 15. So all other stuff I make by default, a little bit of dissipation and just a little bit of disturbance for the density. So mainly with flames, I play just here. Create a small lifespan to avoid very long flames here. With a smaller buoyancy, with less cooling rate, I create a little bit lower than in my old pyro, 4K reference temperature. And yeah, with the 3 sub-steps maximum. So that's what I got here. I play just a little bit with the max, so we can just turn this off. And if you go to, you can disable the file cache. If you go here to the pyro post process, we can see a different, it's not a very huge res seam. You can see that I have the volume size, voxel size 0.2, so it's not a very, very high res seam. You can see it. And we have a nice expansion. So it's not that what I want to have here. You can see there's a big plumes of smoke, and I definitely need to add some disturbance with this smoke, and definitely to have more substeps, because it's those big mushrooms are created mainly from the low substeps amount, and need to cut those areas. But anyway, even this thing you can do with your sparse mode and with the flame. Maybe it's not a great example how to use it, but you can try to apply this stuff here for the rocket. Anyway, you can play with those expansion setup with the temperature, because mainly when we create just a fire, as we did in last lessons, we mainly just emit some smoke, but we're not using the temperature and expansion here. So that's the case we can do this.